Hey guys, and welcome to another video from the Parrott Bros. Now, as you can see here, I am going to be doing a comparison between the Mk1 TT and the Mk2 TT. Now stick around because you may be surprised by the results. Before we get stuck into it, let's jump to that intro. Okay, so now we're in the Mk2. There are some noticeable differences. Things like it has a flat bottom steering wheel, it has paddle controls and steering volume controls, so you can change your music as you drive. That's something you don't see on the Mk1. It has some other features like you can get an automatic DSG gearbox, or I'll probably get told for not calling it an automatic, but a DSG gearbox in most of the ranges. So from the 2 litre to the TDI, TTRS, TTS, they all offer an auto DSG option, which is very nice. It's not something that was offered on the Mk1. Only the 3.2 or a 180 spec one is where you'd be able to get an automatic gearbox. So let's take it for a drive. The other thing I will note, and if anyone watches the channel, they will know, I absolutely love a cup holder. This one has two, albeit they're not great if you have a big Costa, because as soon as you put the handbrake down, the leather piece on the handbrake will take the lid off and squeeze the cup and put drink everywhere. But besides that, it's pretty good. All right, for a couple of cans or a couple of bottles, happy days. Moving on to some of the other noticeable facts in this car. It has a CD player in the dash. Now, the sound system in this is not too bad sound-wise, but connectability, not very good still. Audi is slightly behind in the times with their stereo systems. This one is, you can save channels. I'm not 100% sure whether it's DAB or not because it's not very good. It's quite hard to change because it's an odd shape, so you need to buy a whole dash compartment to do it. It doesn't come with Bluetooth for music playback as standard. Most of them don't even come with a Bluetooth car phone. So one thing to bear in mind is if you are looking for a Mk2, you may have to do some upgrades to the stereo system. A couple of nice touches it does have. It has a digital speedo readout, so that's really easy for quick glancing reference. As far as I'm aware, there isn't any issues with the clocks like there is on the Mk1. The Mk1 does suffer with a dash pod issue where it just dies, it tells you the wrong fuel, and a list of other reasons. Inside, it's very quiet. You can tell it's a newer car, slightly more modern and enhanced. Not as sporty, of course, but then this is just the 2 litre turbo, 200 horsepower, 199 horsepower option, so it's not massively geared towards performance. If you do get a TTS or a TTRS, they do have a noisy exhaust, especially if you have a DSG. They make the noticeable farts on gear changes. This does actually make a little boom on gear changes. You probably won't notice it because it's quite sealed in the car, but when you do accelerate and it does change gear quickly, you will notice a slight sound on the gear changes. And it's, when you put it where you want it, it does go there. It feels quite, we'll call it bland, like it's not geared to be a sporty car. You can tell it's sort of geared towards more of an everyday kind of car. It's very dull, very just everything does what it's supposed to do, whereas with the Mk1 you really know you're driving it. There's quite a lot of driver input required, mainly probably because it's older, the steering's a lot heavier, and it is what it is. It's previous technology. Now with this, the reason I'm doing this video is because I think the Mk2 is definitely coming into its own. Don't get me wrong, Mk1 forever, but the Mk2 I can see the purpose, because as times go on, fuel is getting more expensive, life is getting more expensive, and the Mk2 does become more appealing because realistically, let's be honest, it's a newer car, so therefore should be more reliable. Now you are still buying a 14 to 16-year-old car because they started making these in what, 2007, 2006, 2007, so really early ones, and you're going to be buying, if you're buying the cheap end, you're going to be buying the higher milers. Not an issue as long as it's got full service history. All the same things apply as the Mk1. You need to make sure it's had regular service intervals. If it's Quattro, make sure the Quattro system has been serviced. Let's put it into sport, see what that's like. Make sure it's had the cam belt or chains done, depending on the engine. So I mean, in sport, there it goes. There's no arguments with that. It does go. But yeah, it's one of those. You have to sort of be aware of what you're buying. Now, money-wise, a good Mark 1, and we'll say good as in like not horrific, £2,500 to £3,500. A Mark 2, and we will say an average one, because obviously this is low-end price-wise, they're on eBay from £3,000. So 3 to 4, you may take your life in your own hands. 4 upwards, you may get a nice one. Having a look, there was a few under 100,000 miles, not category registered, with a reasonable service history for around the £4,000 mark. So a lot of car for the money. This, to put this into perspective, I bought this car for a family member 3 years ago, and it was £4,750, and it had less than 100,000 miles and with a full service history from a known Audi specialist, service-wise. So a very good car. All right, yeah, it's a bit bland. It's got the smaller wheels. It hasn't got any of the nice grills or anything. But these come with things like fog lights as standard. It has that rear spoiler that when you press the button, it pops up. Or, if you have that funny discussion, the person who bought this said to me, oh, the spoiler doesn't come up very often, only when I'm on the motorway. And I said, oh, well, that's because it doesn't come up until you're doing over, I think it's like late 70s, maybe 80. And then they were like, I was speeding. Okay, yeah, cool. Or you can just press this button here, which makes it come up. So that will impress you, maybe not everyone else, but hey, it's cool. And they are a few nice touches. Driver comfort-wise, it's very nice. The seats hug you very well. I'm quite a big lad, and they still hug me pretty well. They have this nice contrast with the red leather and the black interior. You may not like the red. There is loads of options available, same as the Mark 1. There is so many little specs you can change. You can upgrade the grills. The upgrade path for these is very good. If you check out Car Chris's or any other of the channels on YouTube, you'll see there's multiple things you can do. They keep the Audi sort of lines. They've got the climate, they've got heated seats. It has these lovely sort of twist on, twist off air vents like you see in the Mark 1, and it is a nice place to be. Would you have one of these for a daily? Yes, 100%. If you needed something a bit more reliable, a bit more modern, maybe arguably a little bit safer, because obviously as you go on, safety gets better. The back seats, there's a tiny bit of legroom. I mean, I'm in my normal seating position, which is quite nice and low. Similar amount of legroom. My knee's still touching the center console, same as in the Mark 1. But you could arguably take 4 people in this a little bit more comfortably than in a Mark 1. The boot is pretty big, and the seats do fold flat to give you a bigger boot. The parcel shelf is a little bit better in the Mark 2. Now, the only benefits that I can see having a Mark 1 over a Mark 2, and I say only benefits because this is wholly dependent on what you want to do with it. You could daily a Mark 1 all you want. Now, there is some things to bear in mind. They are coming up to 25 years old. Now, that does inherit some problems, like certain parts may become no longer available, so Audi will stop selling them, and you will not be able to get certain things genuine. One of them being radiator fans for a 3.2. I think one is no longer available, so you have to buy a patent, which, to be honest, as long as you buy a good patent part, isn't really an issue. But you do have to be aware of things like that. You may not be able to get body panels, genuine windscreens, all that kind of stuff as you go on. So it is one thing to bear in mind. The other is, if you're buying a 20 to 25-year-old Audi, you've got to be prepared to have some money to the side, that if it does need anything, that you're going to have some money to do it, because it is naturally going to go wrong more. The older it is, the more likely parts are to fail. It is just a fact of life. I'm not saying that the Mark 2 is going to be any better, because you're still going to be buying it. It could be 15 to 17 years old. However, there's a good possibility that it will be a little bit better if you buy one that's lower mileage. Hopefully they've worked through all the bugs on the Mark 1, and the Mark 2 will be a slightly more reliable car. Now, what would I choose? See, I'm a sucker for the Mark 1 because I like the iconic stylings. I feel like the Mark 2, they've tried to make it a little bit more posh, is probably the best way of putting it. A bit more elegant, and not as showy, because the Mark 1, if you look at the Mark 1, especially the V6, the Quattro Sport, let's have a little kick down. Nice, kicks down quite well. The gearbox is definitely better in this. Yeah, but if you look, if we go back to what I was saying, if you look at the Mark 1, the Mark 1 had that the showy look. It had the spoiler extension, it had this, it had that, and a lot of people, it was sort of like it looked like a sports car, but it didn't 100% deliver. Whereas this, they've gone for that slightly more elegant look. Like they've gone for slightly nicer touches, like the spoiler that pops up. They've gone for the engraved fuel cap. This one has, they all have fog lights on the Mark II. It has the slightly nicer grille, but it is not as sporty and as rounded looking. Don't get me wrong, still a great looking car, but for me the Mark I takes it on looks every single time. But there is certain features that you're going to want. You may want a diesel one. I don't know why, maybe for miles per gallon, because that's all I can think of. They're like 170 horsepower, so not overwhelmingly fast. But you can have one in a DSG box and diesel, something you can't have on a Mark I. You may want a TTRS and you want 300 or 400 horsepower. It's a lot easier on that than it will be on a Mark I. I think if I was to have a Mark II now, I would get a TTS, because they're sort of circa 275 horsepower, I think. And you can do a few bits, downpipe and a few other bits and bobs, front mount. And you can get them to like 360 horsepower. DSG, they've got mag ride, so suspension is phenomenal. You wouldn't need to change it. If you've ever driven a car with mag ride, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And they're just a great all-rounder. Now a TTS will set you back between 6 and 10 grand from low end to really nice, and they are a heck of a lot of car for the money. That's on what we're encroaching on. That's like QS money or really low mile 225 or 3.2 money. But you could get in that and you could send it every single day, and you are far likely to have less issues than you are with a Mark I. I know, it upsets me, but it's true. But would I have a Mark I for a daily? Yes, because I love driving them. I love seeing them on the road. You don't see them as often. You certainly see the 3.2. They certainly see the Mark II a lot more than you see the Mark Is. But that is because I think they were mass produced. Everyone loves them. Don't get me wrong, the Mark Is were mass produced, but they're sort of falling by the wayside now because a lot of people are using them more for a weekend car over a daily. Now let me know. I want to know what you would have for a daily, or what you have for a daily, and why. Do you have a Mark I or a Mark II? The only reason I haven't compared the Mark III is because they're outpriced at the moment. They are far more expensive, whereas if you're looking at Mark Is and Mark IIs, they are similarly priced. So let me know what you think. What would you have, a Mark I or a Mark II? Let's say we're doing sort of 20 or 30 miles each way a day for work. What would you have? And also, if you want to go further, what engine would you have in which one? Because that's always an interesting one, because they do a 2-litre turbo instead of a 1.8 on the Mark II. They do the 3.2 still, and then they do a TTS, which is a 2-litre, and they do a 2.55 cylinder TTRS, which of course is probably nearer £20,000, but you know, 2.5. I would stick with my Mark I for the time being, although I am mindful that they are getting older and inherently they do have more faults. I myself took it to the ring, had the rad fans fail on me. Not an ideal situation on the hottest weekend of the year. So I don't think I'd have had that issue with a Mark II. I may have done, because the fans could go in any car, but let's be honest, newer car is less likely to have as many problems. Am I going to rush out and buy a Mark II? Probably not. Would I have this one if it becomes up for sale? Maybe. But I love the Mark I. For me, it still wins it on being iconic and the looks that you get and the discussion I have with people. If I park anywhere, I went to the petrol garage the other day just to get some fuel, and I had 2 people talk to me about the Audi TT. One loved the colour, one tried buying it. Once I pointed out all the problems, the second person wasn't as keen on buying it. However, they still compared their love for it. So, plus I will never sell that car. But yeah, they are fantastic cars. The Mark II, you won't go wrong. You've got to drive one to appreciate what they're like. It's definitely a nicer drive. It's quieter, it's more malleable, but it is a little on the dull side. The Mark I, you know you're driving it because you have to put a lot more input in. It all depends on what you want to use it for. If you want an automatic diesel, or a DSG diesel, or a DSG 2-litre, so you want a bit of sport but you want that comfort driving like this one, then it's only really one option for you, is the Mark II, isn't it? But apart from that, all I can do is give you the facts and maybe go and test drive some if you're looking. I certainly wouldn't discredit the Mark II. However, I am still a Mark 1 guy, and all you're going to see is Mark 1 content on the channel for the time being. So that's enough from me. Hope you've enjoyed this video. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but I felt like I needed to have more experience in the Mark II. Obviously, I've had enough experience in the Mark 1s, or enough of them, to discuss. But yeah, it is a great car, not to be discredited. I'm sure you're probably surprised by the fact that I'm not disagreeing about this car in the future, but it is a great car. Until next time, guys, bye for now.